thumbs down on any policy provisions. They'll just say, well, we're concerned about this, or have you thought about this, you're concerned about this. And so anyways, your point being, we need to have that initial conversation and then absorb that feedback and determine whether we're ready to present an ordinance to council or we need another study session on it.
Yes, that's what I think. And because one of the themes that I've been hearing over and over and over is, you know, talk to us early. Talk to us early. We have a better chance of working out differences early.
Right.
So I think we should do that.
I agree.
Is it possible for us to talk about the 15% of a street? Is that what it was? There's something I wrote down about 15%.
Yeah, I think that was within the context of the 55-foot buffer and no more than 15% of any given street. I believe that's what she read earlier.
Yeah, so for the staff report, so one agency required a 55 feet between STRs and no more than 15% of parcels per block with STR operations. There was another agency that provided that no more than 15% of parcels could have an STR per block, and that one did not have a buffer.
Because at least if we do that,
Yeah.
then we can take more time to talk about the rest if we need to.
I think we do have to do this. I mean, we were saying, no, we'll do it later, but if we don't put some kind of constraint and stops on it, what's to stop it from being 10 houses on one street?
Yeah, we can, yeah,
There really isn't anything,
no.
especially if they're not multifamily, right? At least multifamily, we have a percentage.
Yeah,
So does the 55% and 15% of a street seem reasonable?
55,
Feet, I'm sorry. 55 feet,
I think that's kind of low, but
small,
yeah,
because that could be next door.
right.
It could be.
200 feet
On bigger lots.
and 15%?
200 feet, Sue?
So are you talking 200 on one side and 200 on the other, or 200 total?
All the way around.
It's probably easier to do a radius. Just
A radius.
Say that it's a radius.
Or,
Is a radius the right answer, or is the diameter, is it like,
ooh,
Go either way.
I mean, some of the little, go
I
ahead.
kind of, I don't know, seems to me like another map issue. If we could see, I mean, I think that so many of the things that we already provided are going to make us lose a ton of already existing STRs. So I don't know, because I really would like to see a map like with the radius thing so that I could draw a radius around and see how big that is. I mean, in some blocks that could be 20 houses.
I know, it's all the way to the next block, right?
Well, not that many, but yeah, because if you're doing circles,
Well, it's also all within the context of a 150 unit cap. So if you're now eliminating STRs because of your density, what are the odds that someone's going to buy up a vacant house for 90-day rental after a year of not renting it out as an STR?
right? And then again, what if you have several that are on the same block? How do you determine who gets it and who doesn't?
Right. I'm
We
more
had talked
concerned.
about that in the lottery.
Oh, yeah.
How are we going to determine who wins
Yeah, I guess there's more.
if they still want to do it?
There's so much to flesh out here, so I guess we're going to have to wait on that. I don't know what else to say.
Well, my suggestion is, and this would be my suggestion whether we wanted to flesh it out tonight or not, it would be helpful to understand what are the impacts that you're trying to address. And if you start from that premise, then, you know, perhaps we can help you try to figure out what that might look like. Now, we aren't going to be able to fully flesh that out tonight because even I don't have a diagram of where all these STRs are located. But when we do bring this back, and we will have to, and I do recommend that we bring back this issue to discuss, but if you can at least talk a little bit about what it is you would like to see
Okay,
in terms of a buffer, like why do you want that 200-foot buffer?
because I don't want a
What are you
majority,
trying to see, and think of it in terms of a block,
I am,
right? How long are our blocks? How, you know, how long are they normally? And how many homes do you want to see per block? And just, you can just talk about that amongst, stop trying to like draft the
the
ordinance,
numbers.
right?
What I'm
us
trying
bring
to-
back and come back to you with some ideas that we can put together that try and address your issues, and I'm
Okay.
trying to understand, what are your issues with this whole density buffer concern?
It's from my point of view, it's a concentration of too many short-term rental homes in a neighborhood, like an undue number relative to the number of not short-term rental homes. So when there's a short little block that has 10 houses on it and 3 of them are short-term rentals, that's too many, right?
And that's too many
what I'm
because of
talking,
because of the complaints,
Because of the impact it has on the neighborhood.
right.
because of the parking, because of those types of issues.
And because it's
I'm trying to understand, are you?
Because
are
you don't know your neighbors anymore.
it's
It's
not a neighborhood anymore.
Right.
No,
It's a
right.
hotel
No,
zone.
Yes.
And so because my mindset was somewhere else, right? I was thinking, are you looking at this in terms of trying to get rid of bad actors? But that's not
Well,
what you're looking at. You're looking at it for purposes of addressing these impacts, like parking, like neighborhood
Character.
ambiance, for lack of
Yes.
a better word. That's good for us to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So we can go, are there other issues? I mean, those 2 issues are,
I think that's primarily it for me.
Yeah.
I mean, through no, intention, but the outcome is Beach Boulevard is 53% STRs.
yes.
Because it can be. Because there's nothing stopping it from being. So this, to me, is a thing that would prevent that.
Right.
It's just like our cannabis ordinance.
Yeah, it is.
You couldn't have 3, well, you could have 3 in Sharp Park, but you couldn't have this one operator because it was too close to a daycare,
Right, exactly.
right? That's what I'm talking about. It forced it to be spread out and not all concentrated up in one.
Got it.
And it was very clear to the people who were going for the permits where they could be and where they couldn't be.
Right.
Right.
And see, that's the thing, because we already have existing permits, thus we can make a map, we need the metric, so if someone comes in to apply, they can find out right away, oh, I'm sorry, your street already has 2 on it, and until one of those 2 stops being a STR, that we're full.
No, this is
I mean-
helpful.
Yeah.
I think that, unless you have other direction, right, other issues that you're trying to solve with this buffer and density issue, I would ask that you let us go back and look at all this analysis and bring you something back when we bring back a draft of the.
That makes sense to me.
That'd be great.
Because we're imagining. I mean, the
and-
people who live in a neighborhood that's experiencing that know it very well. The rest of us are only trying to make policy to prevent it from continuing.
Right, yeah, and thank you for the
I agree.
questions.
That's a big complaint about from the neighbors, is that they don't know their neighbors. And if there's multiples, if there's one, yeah, it might be okay. But if there's multiples, then it just amplifies it
So
Yeah.
for them to think that their neighborhood is gone.
Right, and people should be able to enjoy their homes,
Right.
feel safe.
That's what it's really about.
Yeah,
Got it.
thank you for the questions, Michelle, that was super helpful.
Yeah.
To the point around the coastal commission,
Yes?
I don't want to see coordinating with the coastal commission get in the way of the ordinance that we have articulated we want, which means for the non-coastal zone,
True.
even though the Coastal Commission themselves may have an alternative view of what they would wish to see, which will take time to get to the point of. So it seems like when the ordinance is ready, we could put in place for the non-coastal zone, and then at the will of Coastal Commission, if it needs to be adjusted, coastal zone specific.
Then we'll have to have two.
Okay.
I mean, at that point, right? I mean, we were asked, do we want to do it a priori? I don't think we do. It's more work. But if we end up having to because of conditions the Coastal Commission would be imposing, then we will. They did that in Marin. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's get us moving as quickly as we can, right?
yeah.
Is there any other direction or questions?
Did you have more questions, Kevin? I know you had some thoughts. No? Okay.
If I may?
Okay, I still have a few other little points I want to bring up that we haven't talked about.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
But I'll be fast. I think we need to say that these can only be in legally permitted dwelling units. So, I mean, we've said no ADUs, but no RVs, no tents, no mobile homes. I don't know about mobile homes, maybe you want to talk about that, but, because some of them are owners, but, and no future buildings / construction, right? You actually have to have a unit in place before you can apply.
Right. Oh, yeah, because you have to
I-
be there for a year.
You can't
Or
just get in
hold
line
it
and
for
get
you.
your queue
Yes,
if you don't have a unit built.
correct.
Yep.
Okay. One other, or some other cities had a no transfer of STR permits, right? So if you sell your house partway through, then you have to reapply. You can't just take over a permit
Yes,
because you're a different primary resident. So maybe we don't
Definitely.
even need to talk about that.
no transfer.
Some of them had insurance requirements, so, you know, sometimes as a property owner, you only have so much, but if you're renting it out, then there's a possibility for other damage to other neighbors, and so I've seen some cities with a $500,000 insurance requirement. So,
Whoa.
I don't know, I'd love to hear from staff if that's something we might need to consider. And then the main thing is just again, other cities, especially, well, Half Moon Bay has, you know, San Francisco, Santa Monica have requirements for the platforms themselves. And I want to make sure we get that in here.
Yeah,
And, you know, obviously requiring them to have a listing number is one of those things. But also being able to collect fines, and I think I've sent you some of that language, right? So the fines are based on them being able to collect their
Fees.
percentage of their fees, their money, right? And that's what has stood up in court.
And the data also that they provide?
Yeah, and I'd really like to ask them to share the data, so that, I mean, I know Airbnb doesn't do that now. So can we, and there was,
You know, the argument that they will likely make, but, I'm sorry. The argument that they will likely make, that they've made, not with regard to Pacifica at all, but in other jurisdictions that I've worked in, is they'll say it's proprietary information, right? That is what they like to say about everything in terms of disclosure. Not to say that we can't impose it, but they do not like to provide cities with a lot of information. But we can, you know, we can check with them. But, you know, that's certainly something that we should, you know, consider. I will need to look into whether or not what Airbnb's position on that is in terms of.
yeah, I'm just looking for ways to help us with enforcement. Like we're saying, you know, so many people per unit, like to know that you're not actually renting out to 16, or that you're not actually, you know, exceeding your 90 days, so that we have some verification.
Yeah, and you know, if that's going to put a bigger administrative burden on them, it's not as easy, not to say that we can't do it, but we don't want to be imposing regulations that we cannot enforce, number one, and that we don't know how practical it will be to enforce it. Like, we could put that obligation in, but will Airbnb cooperate and provide us with that information? And then number two, if they don't, is it worth it for us to go through, enforcement proceedings against Airbnb? Which, what I would like to find out is how enforceable is a provision like that? And I don't have the answer for that
Okay,
right
yeah, if you could research that. And in the meantime, we can also ask for this information from the
Yes.
owners, right?
Yes, and that, the city manager just raised a good point. We can require of the permit holder, right, that information.
Right. And would we do that quarterly, right? We wouldn't wait till the end of the year and know that they're over their 90 days.
Well,
I think that's a good question, but what it comes down to, again, this is a requirement for self-reporting that they're limited to 90 days. At the end of a year, before their next permit renewal, if we have reason to believe that they're exceeding that, then we'd have to launch pretty costly and difficult auditing procedure to try to prove that and then revoke their permit.
And I just don't want to wait a whole year. It's like, so, they pay their TOTs quarterly. Can't we ask for that data quarterly? How many rentals, how days have you had?
Right, but what are we gonna, what are we,
At least it's self-reporting, but at least we're tracking and you could make sure they know they can't rent
And
it
if there's
anymore
a
that year.
discrepancy, then we can engage in an audit.
We can engage early and not wait a whole year.
To your point around Airbnb providing information, I was heartened that we got information of what a government relations representative looks like, which I think has been sorely lacking as we're accustomed to government relations person in PG&E or Comcast or Verizon or what have you. As of the last couple of days, it seems like we now have one in Airbnb. So I think that after this meeting, it would be good to follow up with their government relations people, because that's what they're there for us to ask those questions.
yes.
And see how far.
That is what they're there for, and I will say that we've always had a government relations person. But do we ever get their attention?
Right.
No, but we are getting their attention now, so that is good news, right? But it's not like they just now created one for this jurisdiction. There's always been one, but we just have.
Well, I'm happy that they finally reached out.
Yeah.
Of the 4
And-
conversations I had, that was one of them. It was good to finally have that conversation and have that resource.
And so, just so I'm clear, we wouldn't be able to, legislate what kind of data we want to get from the platforms, not just Airbnb, but all of the platforms that are?
Well, I'm not saying we can't do that. Remember that I don't say we can't do that.
Right.
What I'm telling you is, sure, we can put all of these tools in the ordinance, but the issue is, how enforceable are they going to be? And what I will tell you, just in the examples that we've been talking about just now. So you're talking about putting this obligation on the permit holders? Well, they will have much more incentive to comply with that ask than Airbnb. Airbnb, in my experience, will not be, unless, now that we have communication with our government relations person, that is the person that, Assistant City Manager Carter will need to get in touch with to talk about these provisions. And that's what I want to have happen, because we need cooperation from Airbnb to make this really work for the city in the manner that you're hoping that it will.
Yeah.
And I guess my thought is, I believe that putting this obligation on the permit holder, not that we're not going to put other obligations on Airbnb, but in terms of putting a burden on them to create data or to give us data that that they will say may or may not exist. We know it does, but I'm just telling you that these are sort of the pitfalls that you enter when you try to negotiate things like this with an entity like Airbnb, where we don't have a lot of leverage with them. We can put it in the ordinance, but I would like to find out from Airbnb what their temperature is with complying with that obligation. I mean, we'll put it in there, but if they're saying, well, we don't think that's legal, go ahead, put it in there, we're not going to comply, then the only way we could force them to comply is to take them to court. So we should know that before we start, including a provision in the ordinance that essentially it's going to be very expensive for us to implement.
I just want to be clear that Ms. Carter has been working with Airbnb and their government relations folks for a long time.
And my brain's fizzled
Yeah,
out.
I can't do anymore.
Okay.
That was all my.
Cool.
All right, Tiger.
Appreciating that we've been working with them for a long time. It's nice that they finally reached out to us a little bit so that we also have that avenue to follow up with our concerns. As I have stated a couple of times, I got to have 4 very good conversations leading up to tonight. The Airbnb with an unhosted STR owner, with a couple of the folks who are looking to regulate more strictly. And again, I have been annoyed being kind of on a end of a spectrum on this, where usually I don't do that. I try and figure out what neutral looks like. But, and I look back in my notes, this conversation I was approached about 2 years ago, at which point I had to tell that person, oh, you're being annoyed by this person this business entity living next to you. It'll probably take about 3 years for something to come to fruition, because I'm acutely aware of the speed of government, and at the speed of government, 3 years is fast-tracking something. And we're about 2 years into that process now. So within that context, last goal setting last year in March, a bunch of people came out to make sure we put this on our work plan. And then this March, for goal setting, even more people came out to make sure we put this on our work plan. So it's been on our work plan now for upwards of 2 years, well, 1.5 years, on top of the initial conversation with that person I was having. And I've been happy to meet some of the unhosted operators, and dismayed that they came into this conversation at the last possible moment, because they seem lovely, and this has been building for 2 years and has been on 2 separate work plans, and it's the tail end of it. And after working with these residents for 2 years to get to that fast-track version of government, it's been annoying to have all this extra added data, because at this point, we've been working pretty diligently to come to the place we're at, and it's hard to shift that mid-gear when you're at the finish line. But what I did want to recommend is every March we have a goal setting, that these laws, at the end of the day, aren't etched in stone and can be changed. What I would love to have seen, if I had indication that there was a second side to this story a lot sooner, would have been a task force between a couple of the unhosted folk, a couple of the folk who are really going out of their skin over their experiences, and maybe a couple of neutral folk. Mary and I have experience in this and have seen what looks like success had it come to fruition. And it would have been nice to have had a task force to suss out what would have been more equitable at the end of the day. And once this is passed and temperatures have an opportunity to cool, anybody operating in our town has every right to petition council to come out to that goal-setting time in March to ask for that process to be placed as a priority to figure out what would be more equitable if this is not. And so I wanted to offer that as a potential silver lining. Having been feeling a sense of annoyance with myself of where ultimately I felt like I had to go, given 2 years' worth of work in this, I've been putting in with a lot of residents. And I felt like I needed to say that.
And quickly, I just want to say that I really can see both sides. I can see the annoyance. I can see the wanting to live a peaceful existence. And I can see wanting to know your neighbors. I can also see renting your house as an Airbnb, and somebody who I know who saved their house because of it. And there are two sides to it. So thank you all for patience.
12:27.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in. I know it was a long night, one of many long nights on this topic, and we'll look forward to the ordinance recommendations and information coming back from staff. And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 12:28.
Bye, Sue.
Bye, Sue.
Bye.